Hello, listeners. My name is Hyun-Sung Lee. I was born and raised in North Korea. This podcast is about how power really works in Pyongyang, Washington, and beyond. Welcome to The Defector. Colonel Maxwell, it's truly an honor to have you as the very first guest on my podcast. You've been a mentor to me for many years. You're not only one of the finest military strategists I know, but also one of the most principled voices on the Korean Peninsula and human rights. I'm really excited to the very first topic we are ever covering on this show is one of the most important and then dangerous strategic moments for Korea in years. First of all, let me introduce you to our audience. Colonel Maxwell is a 30-year veteran of U.S. Army, retiring as a Special Forces Colonel, and one of the world's leading experts in North Korea, psychological warfare and deterrence strategy. He previously served as the Associate Director of the Center for Security Studies at Georgetown University and as a Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He is also the Vice President of the Center for Asia-Pacific Strategy and Executive Director of the Korean Regional Review at the United Press International. Colonel, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be to help you launch this, which I think is going to be a very important podcast that I think will be very informative, not because I'm here, but for what you're going to do in forthcoming episodes, because you really have an opportunity to help inform and educate all of us about what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, and your expertise and insights about North Korea are just invaluable. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Great comments. Colonel, the first question would be, the Pentagon released the 2026 National Defense Strategy just last week. What was your first reaction to that paper?
That's a great question, and I think you've got to put it in context with the National Security Strategy, which, of course, the first criticism from a Korean perspective is that in the National Security Strategy, it didn't mention North Korea at all. And so that was something that some people criticize or worry about. I would remind everybody that a national security strategy cannot cover everything, and it's not so much threat-based, but it's aspirational and really to set the guidance for the other the rest of the departments within the U.S. government, and to give them guidance and focus. But really to inform the American people, our friends, partners, and allies, and our adversaries how we are going to approach strategy throughout the world. And so that's what the National Security Strategy. The National Defense Strategy is really how the military is going to support that strategy, and it is more threat-based. And it specifically does talk about North Korea. And in fact, it talks specifically about China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And so it mentions those threats, with China being the number one in overseas threat. And of course, what is really important to understand is that the number one priority for the National Security Strategy and National Defense Strategy is defense of America, defense of the homeland, which, believe it or not, has always, for the 30 years I was in the Army, defense of the homeland was always number one. But it is being
that should be
addressed to a much greater degree, a much finer point put on it, which no one should be put off by that, because every country has to defend itself first. So because we focus and state so strongly defense of the homeland does not minimize the other threats or the support to our allies.
I see. So, there's often confusion between the national strategy and the national defense strategy. So you already perfectly explained the different functions. And do you believe a national defense strategy matters more operationally for the allies like South Korea?
Yes, certainly for the military alliances, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, though, that we should keep in mind, in addition to strategies, and that we also have other agreements. And so South Korea had two summits with President Trump, President Lee, and President Trump, and many agreements were made during those summits. And from shipbuilding to submarines, and the like. And so. Sometimes when agreements like that are made, they may not be listed specifically in the national security strategy or the national defense strategy. But that doesn't minimize them, or that doesn't mean that we are omitting them.
Mm-hmm.
It's that agreements have already been made, and since they've been made, they're not going to be necessarily have to take up extra space in those strategic documents. So I would caution everybody, and this happens every time a strategy comes out. When someone doesn't see their specific issue in it, then they feel like they have been slighted or insulted or neglected. That's not necessarily the case.
I see. And as you know, this national defense strategy puts more emphasis on burden sharing after homeland first. So what was your what do you think that implicates South Korea pay more, including Japan and other allies?
Well, I think on the face of it, that's what everybody looks at. They look at a percentage of GDP on their defense spending, and so that's how it's measured. But that is really a false measurement. But it is really the only standard that you can really publicly discuss in a simple manner, in a manner that you can really judge. I would characterize, though, the intent of the National Defense Strategy is not so much burden sharing, but burden owning. And just like we focus on the defense of our homeland, what we are really saying is that every country must own their defense burden. Must own that first. And that's important because for too long, people have felt, both Americans and our allies, there's always been this feeling that there's nothing to worry about. America's going to come to their rescue. America's going to bail them out. And from an American point of view, that's what gives rise to the idea that our allies are freeloaders. And, the argument among some is that because of the alliances and because of the power of the United States, that our allies have not had to invest in defense spending level. Now, I would caution that is, again, a judgment of percentage of GDP and financial. But there are many ways that our allies contribute to our alliances, both from a monetary perspective, but also from a military power perspective and the instruments of power. We think about the military instrument, but we don't think about diplomacy or information or economic. And South Korea, a big part of the national security strategy and the agreements that have been made are going to come from South Korea's membership as a partner in the arsenal of democracies. South Korea's defense industry is really supporting our mutual strategies and our mutual interests around the world. And South Korea is going to help the United States with shipbuilding. It has, it provided resupply of artillery shells to the United States when the United States sent 155 millimeter artillery shells to Ukraine. And so, and of course, South Korea is selling advanced defense equipment to allies, Romania, Estonia, and others, Australia, Philippines. And so its defense industry is really making contributions. Now that doesn't get added up in the in the GDP and the defense expenditures. Those are contributions to supporting our mutual interests. Just one example. Of course, the other thing is that not only has South Korea constructed the largest U.S. military base outside of America,
Mm-hmm.
It has contributed to all the major operations that the United States has been involved with since the global war on terrorism started. Forces
Mm-hmm.
in Iraq, forces in Afghanistan, and it has conducted peacekeeping operations around the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
so there are many ways that there are contributions, but
Mm-hmm.
most importantly, what is happening now is that the National
Mm-hmm.
Defense Strategy really wants to influence our allies to take complete ownership of their own burden for defense. And again,
I see.
I would
I see.
I would argue that by doing so and stating that they want to be self-sufficient in defense, they want to be able to fully defend themselves, that
Mm-hmm.
actually can strengthen the alliance because we are more likely to want to commit forces to those who can defend themselves rather than those who are looking for a handout or the perception of a handout or a free ride. And
Mm-hmm.
so it will really strengthen the alliance in the long run. But of course, change is difficult for many to understand.
You see, I could tell the new strategy emphasized the South Korea should own ownership more than United States, and the United States is like backing you guys, but the first priority is yourself, like that. But there is some counter arguments like South Korea has been a long beneficiary of U.S. military presence, and some people are thinking about South Korea is taking advantage of U.S. military and investments, and they built economy with the strong support of U.S. military. And now people are talking about that. Isn't that time that South Korea pay back to United States? So I think this point of view originated from the some Trump supporters there, and even the South Korean audience, some of them are thinking the South Korea actually could pay more. It's defending their country, not like defending United States. And then as all others thinking like South Korea is part of the defending China, so it's very important to United States to keep the military presence in South Korea. So do you have any comments on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that argument that South Korea was able to develop economically really, into the maybe 10th largest economy in the world because of the U.S. presence. And that argument has been around much longer than just the Trump administration, even before Trump won. So that's not something new. And there, of course, can be some validity to that. However, I think we have to look at this from an interest perspective. It's not transactional per se, even though that's a word that we use a lot now to describe our relationships as transactional. Yes, U.S. presence provided a security guarantee, has and will continue to do so. That security guarantee is important. Why? Because there is one national security interest that is common to both South Korea and the United States, and that's to prevent war on the Korean Peninsula. And war on the Korean Peninsula is in the U.S. national interest because if there is war, then it will affect the United States directly, economically as well as potentially militarily. So it is in our mutual interest to prevent war, and we should keep in mind why we have forces there. When Hwang Jung-yap defected in 1997, he was asked, why has North Korea built the fourth largest army in the world and has never attacked South Korea? Why haven't they tried to achieve their objective and their strategy? And he said it's because of that they know that they cannot defeat South Korea if it has U.S. help. And if there's U.S.
absolutely
on the peninsula, then they will lose, and the potential is that the United States will use nuclear weapons against North Korea. So that explains two things. One is our declaratory policy works. They are threatened if they use nuclear weapons or they attack the South, that we will respond. And two, it also explains why they have been pursuing nuclear weapons since the 1950s. But the key point is that it is the U.S. presence that contributes to deterrence, and it is in our interest to prevent war. And so the 25,000 or 28,500 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians that are on the Korean Peninsula are a really good investment to preventing war. And of course, now as the Asia-Indo-Pacific evolves, and we have the largest U.S. military base in South Korea, we have 2 major air bases. Korea, inside the first island chain, provides a platform, a strategic agility platform for U.S. forces to operate inside that first island chain. And so I think it's very important to understand the mutual benefits rather than one-sided. And we should not be making one-sided arguments. We must understand the larger picture and the strategic value of both our countries to each other.
So you mentioned Hwang Jung-yeop's comments, and I was also in the North Korean military. We also educate that without the U.S. military, we can win South Korea. Like we can, occupy the South Korean territory if there is no U.S. presence. So that's why every North Korean publication emphasized U.S. military withdrawal like that. And even like there is, civil NGOs in South Korea advocating the North Korea's agenda there. And I truly believe that if U.S. out, there could be a war in Korea. So that's, you mentioned the U.S. military presence in Korea is really critical to securing the peninsula and to keep the peace on the Korean peninsula. And I want to go back to the first island chain stuff. And when I see the first island chain, there is no relation to Korea directly. I know the first island chain started from, Okinawa, right? So I was always wondered, I know it's drafted, related to the, what was that? The line.
The Atkinson line?
Yes, the Atkinson line. So, but why Korea is not included there? So I had a crazy idea that, the first island chain should be revised, starting from Jeju Island, not Okinawa.
Well, I think the way to approach, though, the first island chain it's not from our perspective, it's from China's perspective. What does China consider? And I do think that China looks at the first island chain all the way up to Japan, the mainland, and all the way up to the Kuril Islands, which means Korea is inside the first island chain. And I think that's really important to understand. And what that means is, Korea is at once a geostrategic strong point for the United States, but it's also vulnerable because of its proximity to China. South Korea is a it has the complexity of the tyranny of proximity. Its Seoul is 20 miles from the DMZ, from North Korea, and it is right on the border across the West Sea, the Yellow Sea, with China. And so its proximity is really what makes things so complex, because it's inside the first island chain. But what we want to do is be able to ensure that the U.S. and our allies and our friends and partners have complete access and mobility over the sea lanes of communication throughout the first island chain. The Taiwan Straits and the South China Sea is critical not only to commerce for Japan, but also for Korea. So it's imperative that we maintain the ability to operate within the first island chain. Now, the difficulty, the challenge comes if there's war. And again, proximity, can be vulnerability, but it can also lead to agility, flexibility, and provide other opportunities. And so just because it's inside the first island chain does not mean certainly doesn't mean we should be writing it off at all. But it's really China that really wants to make claims of territory and territorial waters inside that first island chain. Now, this is why there is the West Sea, the Yellow Sea, is contested right now. I think people spend a lot of time looking at the South China Sea. They don't see what China is doing, building, illegal fishing and building structures in the Yellow Sea and the West Sea. And so they are encroaching on South Korean territory there as well. So we need to be aware of that. And again, that's a threat to South Korea that's in no relation to the U.S. presence. It is China trying to expand its influence and gain access to resources and and waterways that will benefit it.
Yeah, first time I heard that China was trying to build a salmon fishery there. I was like, I laughed, and it's really, really South Chinese people want to eat the salmon, and then they built the salmon fishery there. Like, wow.
It is part of China's unrestricted warfare strategy.
That's correct. That's correct.
To include commercial, financial, their non-governmental organizations, their Coast Guard, to be able to set conditions that are favorable to China, China's economic growth, China's diplomatic presence, and Chinese security. But they are practicing unrestricted warfare, not only against the United States and Taiwan, but against South Korea as well.
Mm-hmm. And at first glance, when I see this report, I think I worried the substantial reduction of military presence in South Korea, or even like potentially, withdrawing entire troops from the Korean Peninsula. Have you noticed that? Like, some type of sense? Yeah.
Well, yes. I think a lot of people, when they say that we are only going to provide, and the real key words are to our alliances, we're going to provide critical but limited support. Those words are really, frankly, terrifying to some, and some of our allies, to include in South Korea. However, we must take a step back first. We won't know if there are going to be shifts in force structure until the Global Force Posture Review comes out. And that is a classified document. However, there will be decisions made on moves. Now, the other thing is we have to pay really close attention and look at this critically from a critical analysis perspective. Again, like GDP, percent GDP spending, we focus on numbers. And I use 28,500, that number of troops. People will compare that number. And if we reduce that number, it will be perceived as we're reducing our commitment. Of course, if we raise that number, it could be perceived we're increasing our commitment. However, we continue to modernize. We modernize our military. Some forces in the Korean Peninsula need to be changed. Some of them, we are developing new capabilities, and the capabilities that exist are no longer always the ones that we need. And we are adapting forces in the United States, and then we transition and transform forces that are overseas, in Japan, in Korea, in Europe. And so sometimes you might not need a certain organization, say, for example, a helicopter organization that has, 1,000 people, whereas you may replace that with drones and it only needs 200 people. So you're going to see a reduction in numbers, but you actually could see an improvement in capabilities. And this is the hardest thing to describe, is how we enhance our capabilities and those critical capabilities of intelligence, command and control, air and missile defense, maritime capabilities, and our combined air power. Both South Korea and the United States are flying F-35s, the most advanced aircraft in the world. And so we should not be worried about a reduction in numbers. We are going to continue to transform, and it is really capabilities that we need to be concerned about. And the military professionals, of course, in the military in South Korea understand this, but it's a challenge in helping the people and the politicians to understand what in fact is happening.
Yeah. There was a saying that Congress won't approve the entire withdrawal from the Korean Peninsula, but some people are worrying about President Trump could actually do that if he decides.
Yeah, I think it's possible that he could do that. We are a democratic republic, and so there are checks and balances, and it would certainly trigger some kind of executive congressional standoff there if he was able, he did decide to do that. The real question, though, is to what end? What is the purpose? And I have to believe that the administration, the strategists in the administration, they want to do things that make sense from a U.S. defense perspective. And simply withdrawing our forces from Korea may not have the strategic effect that we want in terms of North Korea, in terms of China, in terms of really our standing throughout the world. And so I think we should not be concerned with a withdrawal because a total withdrawal because I think Congress should push back very hard on that. But we should not be focused on changes in force structure and immediately have a knee-jerk reaction that those changes are somehow negative. That is not how they should be interpreted unless we're not improving our capabilities.
That's good to hear. We are not going to reduce the military in Korea.
Well, no, I didn't say. I didn't say.
No, I know. I mean, the overall capacity. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It is. We need to look at it from a capability and capacity, not strictly numbers. But again, like money, numbers of troops are really the only metric that is really easily communicated, and so we end up relying on those numbers, but that gives us false understanding. We have to look beyond the numbers. That's my point.
I see. So it looks like to me the paper reflects like most ideas came from Undersecretary of Elbridge Colby. Is it fair to say the strategy largely comes out from his intellectual framework?
Yes, from his book, Deterrence by Denial. And some people have characterized, it's interesting, some people have characterized the national security strategy as Colby light with a Western Hemisphere twist, national defense strategy as Colby heavy with a Western Hemisphere twist.
I see.
Those are the two ways that some of the pundits and analysts have described it. Now, I think that there, a lot is informed, and the question is, will his theories hold up to reality? And that's what we don't know. I mean, we put it in the defense strategy to deter China from and his, Colby's basic belief is that, we have to face China, we have to face its aggression, we have to deter it from expanding and taking Taiwan. If Taiwan is taken, then China will become the regional hegemon. That's his theory. So, and of course, that obviously affects Japan and Korea. So it's in the interests of the United States and South Korea and Japan and Taiwan and the Philippines to prevent Taiwan from being taken. And I think that's another key way that we need to look at this strategy is that rather than looking at defense of Korea, defense of Japan, defense of the Philippines, defense of Taiwan, we really need to evolve where our friends, partners, and allies, we have what I like to call a silk web of alliances, not a lattice work, not a hub and spoke, but a silk web of multiple alliances, bilateral alliances, minilateral, multilateral, where we are working together for our own interest, but together, collectively, we enhance the defense of all. And so in a way, it's kind of a collective defense, but when you look at it, all our allies, we all have capabilities that we can contribute to different contingencies. And we have to keep in mind that no contingency is going to occur in a vacuum. And, the two largest contingencies are Taiwan and Korea. And so we must be prepared for both. And the only way for the United States to be prepared for both is with our allies owning the burden, and together we are collectively conducting mutual defense.
So this could be the last question regarding national defense strategy. Do you see this strategy accelerating pressure for faster wartime operation commander transferred to South Korea?
The statement, the position of the United States and the position of the military leaders in South Korea, U.S. and Korean, is that the transition should be condition-based. Now, I've been involved in the entire transition planning since 2004 when it began. And the basic premise from then was that South Korea has to develop its independent warfighting capabilities. In today's national defense strategy, we want South Korea to own the burden. Well, that is, for 20 years, South Korea has been developing independent warfighting capabilities. Now, at the time when this began, there was the idea that we would disband the Combined Forces Command. However, it was realized that this is the best bilateral command the United States has ever been a part of. And I would argue the best bilateral command ever developed in history. And so in the mid-2010s, the decision was made not to disband the Combined Forces Command and instead have a transition where South Korea would have the command of the ROK-US Combined Forces Command. And so the question is, have the conditions been met for a South Korean general to command the ROK-US Combined Forces Command? And we have been going through exercises and training to prepare for this. And, we go through mission capable analyses to reach full mission capability when its Korean general is ready to command the Combined Forces Command with requisite command and control capabilities, intelligence, logistics, and those types of things. But the Combined Forces Command will remain intact. And this is very important. The real change and transition will be a Korean commander. And it's important to understand that, and this is very sensitive and very, very complex. But many people want a change in the operational command of CFC from the U.S. to Korea because they believe it's a sovereignty issue. But that is a misunderstanding because the United States does not control any Korean forces. Korean forces are not under American control. Right now, all Korean forces are under command of the Korean military, and all U.S. forces are under the command of the U.S. military. We have decided to establish a Combined Forces Command, and when the decision is made by Korea and by the United States, we will provide Korean and U.S. forces under the operational control of the Combined Forces Command. And so Combined Forces Command is equally owned by South Korea and the United States, and it answers to the military committee. And the military committee, which is made up of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the senior U.S. military officer, the ROK Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the senior U.S. military officer. That's the permanent military committee. And then the plenary military committee includes the Minister of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, and the commander of Indo-PACOM, and the U.S. chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But the military committee is what oversees the Combined Forces Command, and this is important that there are no Korean forces under the command of the United States. Well, when there is OPCON transition and there's a Korean general in charge of CFC, the United States will still provide U.S. forces under the operational control of CFC. However, they will not be under the control of the ROK government.
ROK government, yeah.
And so it's really important because some Americans will argue that that would be a violation of the mythical Persian rule. There is no Persian rule, but many people say that the Persian rule is that the United States will never allow foreign commanders to command U.S. forces. It goes back to World War I when General Pershing said that he would not break up the U.S. military in Europe to fight under the British and under the French, that they would fight as an American fighting force. So that established a precedent. However, for many years and throughout history, American forces have served under the operational control of foreign commanders. That is normal. For myself in Korea, Many years in Korea, I worked for the Combined Unconventional Warfare Task Force, which is now the Combined Force Special Operations Command. That is commanded by a Korean 3-star general. And I was his deputy chief of staff at one point. So I worked for a Korean general. And so this is not unusual, and it's not something that we should be worried about, because such a long history of an alliance and are working together as allies.
Yeah, your answers explains a lot. Many people in Korea transfer wartime, Operation Command means that withdraw from, military from the Korean Peninsula, and the people are arguing that that's one of the strategies North Korea and the liberal, people in South Korea implement to kick U.S. military out of Korean Peninsula like that. But you already explained there's no like a hierarchy and this committee, controlling, and it doesn't really mean the withdrawal, and then also control who controls who, right? Yeah. And let's move to the Pyongyang drone incident. North Korea claims drones from South Korea entered North Korean airspace. Kim Jong-un's sister warned that South Korea should be responsible, and regardless of who sent, whether it's Yoon or Lee, Kim Yo-jong's, she really had a bad mouth, but she really, talked to the South Korean government all the time that, the trash is scumbag like that. And then this time she also mentioned about that. And why do you think North Korea is so terrified by these drones and balloons?
Well, I think that, it's a paradox. I think that militarily, of course, one is I think it's clear to state for everyone, what is Kim Jong-un most afraid of? Not the Korean and U.S. military, but of his own people. I think we always have to keep that in mind. But he does fear, he does want to survive and remain in power. And of course, it is only the Korean and U.S. military that can remove him of power externally. The Korean people inside North Korea could do that, and hopefully they will. But the paradox is, it is not just about fear of military capabilities. He also needs that threat. He needs the threat from South Korea, from the United States, because that is what justifies the suffering and sacrifice of the Korean people in the North. The Propaganda and Agitation Department highlights these threats. And this is why Kim Yo-jong, her threats are not necessarily directed at us and at South Korea and the U.S. They are to really highlight how bad South Korea is, how bad the United States is. Tell the story inside North Korea, which I should really leave that to you, because you are the expert and you have taught me so much on this.
Yeah, I agree. Many things you already mentioned. It's exactly what North Korea terrifies the most: the people inside, and the people knows the truth. So that's why.
Now, let me say about the drone incident specifically. First, I don't know what happened. I don't have any intelligence on that. There's speculation that some citizens, South Korean citizens, took it on their own to try to measure, nuclear radiation or send them over. Could be, one of them was supposedly part of the previous administration. Was it done to make the Lee administration look bad? Regardless, and of course, then North Korea said it was the South Korean military. I would say this: if it was the South Korean military and they were conducting intelligence gathering, I would own that. I would, if it was the South Korean military, I would say that was, we did that, and that's what we do. We have to use our intelligence capabilities to watch the threat from the North, the real threat that exists. However, when I looked at some of the photographs of the wreckage, they did not look like military drones. They looked more like civilian drones. So
civilian drones,
possible. Yes. And of course, the third alternative is no drones went. No drones went over, and North Korea has just created
fabricated stories.
And I think we should remember that Sun Tzu said all warfare is based on deception, and North Korea, I think, has been masterful at deception. I mean, we have been.
I would say they got the 3 PhDs of deception.
I think that the many times we have been surprised by what North Korea has developed and what they have done. And so, and because they are practicing political warfare and blackmail diplomacy, I would not be surprised if they created a phony incident to try to discredit the South Korea and the alliance. So there are many explanations. I don't know what happened, but I think we should, one, not be afraid of Kim Yo-jong's words. We should understand how she is attacking South Korea with words and the purpose of those words. And then, we should try to understand what happened. We should, there should be a complete investigation. And because South Korea is a democracy, then the people should be informed on what happened. There should be transparency. But again, if it was the military should own it, and then there's nothing else to say about it. And because they didn't say they owned it, I'm not sure that they did it. I don't think that the military did this.
So there was a two major response from the Korea side, South Korea side. So Defense Ministry, made a statement that they don't have intention to provoke North Korea. And then Kim Yo-jong, make a, good comments on that. And another comments from South Korean President Lee. President Lee called the drone flights as an active equivalent to the starting a war and then, the criminal investigation. So it's a little bit tougher, the comments and the decision to investigate the civilian who was just trying to collect the information. And there was a news last year that North Korea released, nuclear, the west to the, sea so that, South Korean, the river could impact it. And then South Korean citizens could be impacted by that. So, do you really think the drone incident could be, could leading to the war, or that's too much?
Well, we don't know what is going on inside Kim Jong-un's mind. One, I don't think Kim Jong-un will ever make a decision to attack the South if the alliance is strong. I think Kim Jong-un, we can criticize him and we can make fun of him, but I think he is smart in that way. He is not going to attack strength. And so we should remember that as number one. I think his most likely option for attack is if he is threatened. If he is threatened really with a threat to the regime, to his power. And that threat will come from within, not externally. Flying drones, look at the number of military incidents that have occurred in the last 7 decades. How many DMZ firefights, how many crab wars in the West Sea. All of those have taken place. None of them escalated. And I will give one reason for that. The one reason why there has never been an escalation, except for Kim Jong-un not making a decision to escalate, the number one reason for no escalation is the professionalism of the military, the South Korean military and the North Korean military. Every incident, both militaries have declined to escalate. They have taken steps to stop the escalation. And nobody thinks about that. We think about every action as a provocation. And I think that and every action could escalate. It could. We should be always be caution, about every incident. But for the last 7 decades, we have not gone to war, primarily because both militaries have prevented that escalation, and because both North and the alliance have made decisions not to go to war. Now, I want to talk about one word: provocation. Provocation is an overused word. And a provocation is really to create an effect or to create an action from our enemy. Now, if we try to fly a drone in North Korea to gather intelligence and it returns without being detected, that is not a provocation. And if a drone gets shot down, or crashes, that is not a provocation. We were not trying to provoke a war. There's still controversy about what happened in the last administration. Did they send drones to Pyongyang? There's seems to be a lot of testimony that they did in fact do that, but we should really analyze this. Number one, why didn't why didn't North Korea respond? If it was such an act of war and such a threat, why didn't they respond at the time? They took no action. They didn't reveal it. And why is that? One is if drones made it to Pyongyang and maybe multiple times, that demonstrates a real weakness in North Korea's air and missile defense. If they're unable to detect drones, that's a weakness. And so they don't want to show that, perhaps, So I think we have to look at these situations not on the face value that everybody attributes to that. Every action is not meant to create an action in North Korea. Flying a drone in North Korea to gather intelligence is a prudent step to ensure that we understand what is happening in North Korea. It could be part of intelligence gathering, which every military must do to put their eyes on the threat and to try to understand what is happening. So we should not term everything a provocation. It is an overused word.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So even, North Korea never mentioned about the Pyongyang drones. And then later, they admit that. Even South Korea, they're trying to investigate themselves, their military operations. I really don't get it. Why South Korea themselves make them, trouble. It's like a political game within South Korea, but the military shouldn't be the target of their political games. It's for defense of the national security. It's defending their people, right? So, this is also related to the Pyongyang incident. But after Kim Yo-jong's threat and then the Pyongyang drone incident, the South Korean government, Lee administration, is now moving towards dismantling the drone operation commands. So when I hear this story, and I really worried and surprised, why the drone is the key in the modern warfares. Now they are dismantling this, key operation command. And what do you think? What's your, assessment on this?
Yeah, this is a great question because this really gets to the heart of military operations and how we organize to conduct military operations. In the United States, we don't have a drone operations command. We don't think that is necessary. So in Korea, they established one. It may be that it's not necessary to have a single control of all drones, to have a command. It may be better that the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines have their own drones and that they're integrated in the unit. That is a military strategy and operational decision that really needs to be made. Now, but I think the point that you're getting at is the political aspect of this. And, the military, it could be interpreted that there is political attacks on the military because of the allegations of the drone flights into North Korea. And what I am concerned about is that if the decision is made to dismantle the drone command, if it's made for military reasons, then that's fine. If you want to take a different approach, that's fine. But if the drone command is being dismantled as a way to try to appease North Korea, as a way to to try to have a perception that tensions are being reduced, or that those who might have been responsible for the drone incursion are being somehow punished, as a statement, a signal to North Korea, then I think we really need to question our strategy. We need to question our understanding of Kim Jong-un, because we should ask, one question we should always ask: what deters Kim Jong-un? That's number one. We should constantly be thinking about what deters. But we should ask ourselves, by dismantling the drone command, how does that influence Kim Jong-un? Do we want him to say, "Oh, thank you, South Korea, you're so nice"? That's not what he's going to say.
No way.
And you don't get anything from North Korea by giving up something. So
that's correct.
I think that dismantling the drone command is somehow going to make Kim Jong-un be more open to negotiations and engagement. I think we are making a big mistake, so because that is not going to influence him. So I think we have to question why. Again, dismantling it for military purposes makes sense. but dismantling it for political purposes really plays into Kim Jong-un's hands, because Kim Jong-un has a political warfare strategy and a blackmail diplomacy strategy, but the war strategy is really focused on two things. One is undermining the legitimacy of South Korea, and the other one is attacking the ROK-US alliance and to try to separate the ROK-US alliance for the one purpose: drive U.S. forces off the peninsula. And so we need to be examining our actions as well as North Korea's actions through the lens of his political warfare strategy and his objectives to end the alliance, end extended deterrence, drive U.S. forces off the peninsula, so that he can focus on regime survival. And how does the regime survive? By dominating South Korea.
Yes, correct. Yeah,
unifying.
That's final goal of Kim Jong. Yeah,
and even though he has discounted unification, peaceful unification, that doesn't mean he has given up his desire to dominate the entire Korean peninsula, which I think is in accordance with the Constitution of North Korea and the party charter.
Absolutely, yeah. Kim Jong-un mentioned two-state solutions, and then South Korea. They even display South Korea is the number one main enemy, unchangeable enemy. It's more than like China. It's more than like Japan and the United States now. South Korea is number one.
Well, I think that is important to understand that, and the reason why South Korea is number one is not just because of its military capability, its ability to defeat North Korea's military. South Korea is the number one enemy because it exists, and because it is an example for the Korean people in the North. Because the more they learn about South Korea, the more they question why they have to suffer. And so that's why South Korea is such a threat. Now, the two-state representation is problematic, because if you accept two states, then that means that you are accepting North Korea as a state, and you're accepting the suffering and sacrifice of 26 million people, the enslavement of 26 million people. And so I would argue that it's morally bankrupt to accept this two-state construct, because you are sentencing those 26 million people to a life of suffering and certain death.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But what upsets me most is the South Korean government and the Ministry of Unification admit that they respect the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK. When I hear that, my heart is like trembling. Like, why? What for? And then does is that mean? Does it mean that like they don't respect the 26 million of North Korean people? They are oppressed by the dictator, and then they have been oppressed for 7 decades. And it looks like to me that the North Korea's, coercive diplomacy, or like, the threat is effectively, validated in South Korea. Now they are listening to North Korea's, order, like Kim Yojong and Kim Jong-un. Really, I'm worrying about the current administration's this, approach. But I mean, they may have a different, strategy, but I don't see any strategy there. So that's why I'm trying to, make voices on the Lee administration's, ineffective approach.
So I think their approach is really based on conventional international relations theory. I think that, and I think this is the problem. This is a problem in Washington. It's a problem in Tokyo. It's a problem in Seoul. Is that we think that we can conduct international relations and apply international relations theory negotiations to dealing with North Korea. And I would argue that conventional international relations theory does not work with North Korea. It does not work with the family regime. We have to understand the nature of the regime, its objectives, and its strategy. There is no sense of win-win, compromise, or reaching an agreement that is verifiable and that will be upheld. It has never happened with North Korea. There has never been an agreement other than the armistice. And I will say the armistice has been successful for preventing war for 7 decades. But all of the agreements we have made, whether it's the Arnie in 1992, the
Mm-hmm.
denuclearization agreement, the Leap Day agreement, the September 2005 agreement, all of the agreements, the agreed framework, none of them have worked, but all of them have been the result of applying conventional international relations theory. And so in defense of the Lee administration, I think
Mm-hmm.
that they are trying, all of their smart professors from Seoul National and Korea University and all their great universities, I think they are trying to apply political science and international relations theory towards North
Mm-hmm.
Korea. And we do the same thing with our expert scholars here in Washington and throughout the United States. We need a better strategy than what we can derive from conventional international relations theory.
Great. Colonel, thank you so much for your time, your insight, and your moral clarity today. As always, your analysis is not only intellectually rigorous, but grounded in a deep understanding of deterrence, human nature, and then, the tragic cost of, strategic, miscalculations. I learned so much from over the years and also this podcast, and it truly means a lot to me to have you as a first guest on this, the deep factor. So thank you, helping us understand and
let me just say, thank you again. It's an honor, but I have learned so much from you, and you have shared your experience about North Korea, about serving in Korean Special Forces. Your insights have really informed so much of my understanding, and I really believe that this podcast will help all of us, Americans and Koreans, to better understand what is happening on the Korean Peninsula, but especially your knowledge. Your lived experience in North Korea is so valuable, and your commitment to a free and unified Korea is really an inspiration to us all. I know you want to go back to Korea and be part of the unification process, and I think that's so important. I respect that so much, and I really I look forward to the future broadcasts on this podcast. So keep up the great work.
Thank you for your strong support, and you are always our mentor. And I mean, not just me, over all our the North Korean Unity Assembly members. So thank you for being our mentor. Thank you. Yeah, talk to you in the next episode.
Thank you.